The moment my wife introduced me as the driver and bank account to her fancy lawyer friends, I knew our marriage was over. What I didn't know was how much fun ending it would be. "Everyone, this is Owen," Vivian announced with that practiced smile she'd perfected during her paralegal training. "He's basically my driver and bank account." The table erupted in polite laughter while I stood there holding her designer coat like some kind of servant. The Saltwater Grill was packed that Thursday evening, filled with Maine's legal elite celebrating some case victory I'd helped finance, but wasn't important enough to understand. I'd made the reservation, paid the deposit, even bought Vivian a new dress for the occasion. All so she could publicly humiliate me in front of people whose respect I'd foolishly thought I wanted. "Owen's an engineer," Vivian continued, her voice carrying that dismissive tone I'd been hearing more often lately. "He builds things with his hands. Very practical." The way she said practical made it sound like a disease. Craig Porter, the senior partner everyone was kissing up to, extended a manicured hand. "Nice to meet you, Owen. Vivian's told us so much about you." His grip was weak, the kind of handshake that screamed, "I've never done real work in my life." Everything about him oozed expensive mediocrity, from his perfectly styled silver hair to his Rolex that probably cost more than most people's cars. "All good things, I hope," I replied, forcing a smile while calculating how much this dinner was going to cost me. Again. Danielle Morrison, Vivian's best friend and fellow gossip enthusiast, giggled. "Oh, we know you're the one who makes everything possible. Vivian always says she couldn't maintain her lifestyle without your contributions." There it was again. I wasn't a husband or partner. I was a resource to be managed and exploited. The other wives at the table nodded knowingly, like they were all part of some club where husbands existed solely to fund their ambitions and social climbing. "Well, someone has to keep the lights on," I said, my voice steady despite the rage building in my chest. "Can't all be lawyers billing $300 an hour for reading emails." The comment landed with uncomfortable silence. Craig's smile tightened. "Engineering must be rewarding in its own way." "Very," I replied. "There's something satisfying about building things that actually work, unlike some professions where you can talk for hours and accomplish nothing." Vivian's heel found my shin under the table. Hard. "Owen's always so modest about his work," she said quickly. "He's just a problem solver." "Aren't you, honey?" The endearment felt like acid in my ears. I was her problem solver, all right. The guy who fixed her car, balanced her checkbook, and apparently funded her social life so she could mock me in public. But as I looked around that table at their smug faces, I realized something important. I was very good at solving problems, and Vivian was about to become one. The dinner dragged on for 2 excruciating hours. I watched Craig's hand brush against my wife's arm more times than coincidence would allow. I listened to Danielle's stories about her latest shopping sprees, funded by her husband's medical practice. I smiled politely while they discussed vacations to places I'd apparently be paying for, but not attending. "The Hamptons house is perfect for couples retreats," Craig was saying, his eyes locked on Vivian. "Very private, very relaxing." "That sounds wonderful," Vivian breathed, completely ignoring my presence. "I'd love to see it sometime." "I'm sure that could be arranged," Craig replied, his meaning crystal clear to everyone except, apparently, my wife's sense of shame. When the check arrived, naturally placed in front of me, the total made my eye twitch. $437 for dinner and drinks. More than most people spent on groceries in a month, casually charged to the driver and bank account, without even a glance in my direction. I paid without complaint, left a generous tip, and helped Vivian with her coat like the well-trained husband I'd apparently become. Outside the restaurant, the October air was sharp with the promise of winter, and I found myself hoping it would be a cold one. Very cold. "That went well," Vivian said, as we walked to our car. Craig seemed impressed with the firm's new direction. I'm sure he was impressed with something, I replied, unlocking her door first like I always did. She paused, studying my face in the streetlight. You were awfully quiet tonight. Everything okay? I looked at my wife of 8 years, really looked at her. When had she become this person? When had I become so invisible to her that she could humiliate me publicly without a second thought? Everything's fine, I lied, starting the engine of the BMW I'd bought her last Christmas. Just thinking. About what? I pulled into traffic, my mind already working through possibilities. Problem solving, I said. You know how I am with problems. The drive home passed in silence, but my brain was anything but quiet. Engineers are trained to see systems, to understand how things work and how they break. Marriage, I was realizing, was just another system. And like any system, it had vulnerabilities. By the time we reached our house in Falmouth Fourside, the house I'd bought with the mortgage I paid, I'd identified the first weakness in Vivian's carefully constructed world. She trusted me to be invisible. That was about to change. The next morning, Vivian left for work with barely a goodbye, too busy texting someone to acknowledge the coffee I'd made or the breakfast I'd prepared. I watched her BMW disappear down Ocean View Drive, then returned to our kitchen to begin my investigation. I'd always been good with details. It's what made me a successful structural engineer. Buildings don't lie, and neither do digital footprints. Within an hour of accessing our shared laptop, I had enough evidence to end my marriage and Craig Porter's career. The text messages were the worst part, not just because of their explicit nature, but because of how casually they discussed me. Owen's working late again, one read. Perfect timing. Does he suspect anything? Craig had replied. Please, he's too busy being useful to notice. I swear, sometimes I think he'd keep paying my bills even if I told him about us directly. I stared at that message for a long time, my coffee growing cold in my hands. She wasn't wrong. I probably would have kept paying, kept fixing, kept being the invisible support system for her life. But that was before she'd made the mistake of putting her contempt in writing. The affair had been going on for 6 months. 6 months of late nights at the office, weekend continuing education seminars, and mysterious charges on the credit card I paid every month without question. Craig had even been to our house, our bed, while I was away on business trips. But it was the financial planning documents that really opened my eyes. Vivian and Craig had been discussing their future together, including how to maximize her divorce settlement. They'd calculated my assets, researched Maine's divorce laws, even consulted with a different law firm about the best strategy for taking me to the cleaners. He's so trusting, Vivian had written. Everything's in joint accounts. He'll never see it coming. I printed everything, organized it into neat folders, and stored copies in 3 separate locations. Then I sat in my home office, the room where I'd spent countless evenings working to pay for her lifestyle, and planned my response. Revenge, I decided, was just another engineering problem. You identify the structural weaknesses, apply pressure at the right points, and watch the whole thing come down. The key was patience and precision. My phone buzzed with a text from Gus Henley, my oldest friend, and the only honest mechanic left in Cumberland County. Beer tonight? Martha's got book club, and I'm not sitting through another discussion about feelings. My place, I replied. Bring tools. What kind of tools? The kind that solve problems. Gus arrived at 7 with a cooler of Allagash and a toolbox that had seen more action than most soldiers. He was everything Craig Porter wasn't, honest, loyal, and comfortable with actual work. His hands were permanently stained with motor oil, and he'd never worn a suit that wasn't rented for a wedding or funeral. You look like hell, he said, settling into my garage with the ease of 20 years of friendship. What's eating you? I handed him the folder of evidence. My marriage. Gus read in silence, his expression growing darker with each page. When he finished, he set the papers aside and opened 2 beers. Well, shit. I always thought Vivian was cold, but this is something else. She called me her driver and bank account, in public, in front of people whose respect I actually wanted. And now I'm going to show her what happens when the driver decides to take a different route. Gus grinned, the same expression he'd worn when we were teenagers planning elaborate pranks on the rich kids from Cape Elizabeth. What do you need? We spent the next 3 hours planning. Gus had connections throughout the service industry, mechanics, contractors, delivery drivers, the invisible network of people who kept the wealthy comfortable. More importantly, he understood the value of strategic inconvenience. Craig's got that new Tesla, Gus said, consulting his phone. Brings it to Peterson's for detailing every Tuesday. Pretentious bastard makes them use distilled water. Interesting. What else? Vivian's been taking her car to that fancy place in Portland. Always books the same time slot, Thursdays at 2. Says she doesn't want to risk running into regular people at a normal shop. I made notes, building a timeline in my head. What about their social circle? Danielle's the key, Gus said. She's got a mouth like a broken fire hydrant. Feed her the right information, and it'll be all over town by dinner. But you've got to be subtle. Subtle. I could do subtle. I'd been invisible for so long that subtle was practically my default setting. There's something else, I said, pulling out my laptop. They're planning to clean me out in the divorce. Joint accounts, shared assets, the whole thing. Gus whistled low. How much are we talking? Everything. The house, my retirement accounts, even my business. According to their research, Maine's divorce laws favor the spouse who can prove they sacrificed career advancement for the marriage. But Vivian's got a career? Not according to the narrative she's building. She's been documenting every time I've asked her to attend a business function, every vacation we've taken, every decision that could be framed as her putting my career first. Jesus, she's been planning this longer than the affair. Much longer. Which means I need to move fast. We finalized the plan over the third round of beers. Nothing illegal, nothing that could be traced back to me directly, but a systematic dismantling of the comfortable life Vivian had built on my back. By the time Gus left, I had a timeline, a list of targets, and something I hadn't felt in months: purpose. I was still awake when Vivian came home at midnight, claiming she'd been working late on a difficult case. She smelled like expensive cologne, Craig's cologne, based on the scent I'd identified from his previous visits to my house. "How was your evening?" she asked, not really listening for an answer as she scrolled through her phone. "Productive," I said. "Solved some problems." She looked up briefly, probably noting the beer bottles I'd deliberately left visible. "Drinking with Gus again?" "You know how I feel about that." "I know exactly how you feel about most things," I replied. Something in my tone made her pause, but the moment passed quickly. She was too busy texting her lover to analyze her husband's mood. "I'm exhausted," she said, heading upstairs. "Don't wait up." I didn't. Instead, I sat in my garage until dawn, refining my plans and thinking about structural engineering. Every building needs a foundation, and every foundation has a weak point. You just have to know where to look. Vivian's foundation was her reputation, her social standing, and her absolute confidence that I would never fight back. Time to start digging. Tuesday morning brought the kind of crisp October weather that made living in Maine worthwhile. It also brought the first phase of my plan into action. Vivian left for work at her usual time, still glued to her phone and still ignoring my existence. I waited exactly 30 minutes, then made my first call. "Peterson's Auto Detailing. This is Mike." "Hi, this is Craig Porter's assistant," I said, adopting the slightly nasal tone of every pretentious office worker I'd ever met. "Mr. Porter needs to reschedule his appointment today. Something urgent came up." "No problem. When would he like to come in?" "He'll call you back." "Thanks." One down. The next call went to Vivian's hair salon. "Salon Mystique, how can I help you?" This is Vivian Bishop. I need to cancel my Thursday appointment. Family emergency. Oh no. Is everything okay, Mrs. Bishop? Just some drama with my husband. You know how it is. I hung up before she could respond, already dialing the next number. By noon, I'd canceled or rescheduled 6 of Vivian's regular appointments, each time dropping subtle hints about marital problems or family drama. In a town the size of Falmouth, gossip traveled faster than bad weather. The real work began at lunch. I drove to Portland, parked 3 blocks from Craig's law firm, and waited. Patience was crucial. Engineers learn early that rushing leads to mistakes, and I couldn't afford any mistakes. Craig emerged at 12:47, walking with the confident stride of a man who'd never faced real consequences. He climbed into his pristine white Tesla, probably heading to whatever overpriced restaurant he frequented. I gave him a 5-minute head start, then followed. The Harbor Bistro was exactly the kind of place I'd expected. All exposed brick and craft cocktails designed for people who needed their lunch to make a statement. Craig had claimed a corner table where he could see and be seen, already working his phone like it contained the secrets of the universe. I took a seat at the bar, ordered a coffee, and waited for the right moment. It came when Craig stepped outside to take a call, leaving his phone and wallet on the table. I didn't need long, just enough time to slip a small device under his car and plant a few seeds of doubt with the right people. "Excuse me," I said to the hostess, a young woman who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. "That gentleman in the corner, Craig Porter? He asked me to let you know he's having car trouble and might need to call for a ride." She looked confused. "Car trouble?" He just went outside. Something about his Tesla acting up. Apparently it's been having electrical issues all week. He's pretty frustrated about it. I left before she could ask more questions, but I'd accomplished my goal. When Craig's car inevitably failed to start later, the restaurant staff would remember our conversation. More importantly, they'd remember that Craig Porter, successful lawyer and Tesla owner, was having problems with his expensive toy. The device Gus had provided was beautifully simple, a small transmitter that would interfere with the car's electrical system at random intervals. Nothing dangerous, nothing permanent, just enough to make Craig's life inconvenient in very public ways. I was back home by 2, just in time for Vivian's first panicked phone call. "Owen, did you cancel my hair appointment?" "Why would I do that?" I asked, injecting just the right amount of confusion into my voice. "I don't know, but Salon Mystique says someone called pretending to be me. They mentioned problems with my husband. That's weird. Maybe someone's playing a prank. Who would do that?" I let the question hang in the air, planting the first seed of paranoia. Could be anyone, I guess. Maybe someone from work? You said office politics have been getting nasty lately. "Maybe," she said, but I could hear the uncertainty in her voice. "It's just strange timing. I'm sure it's nothing. Probably just a mix-up, but it wasn't nothing, and we both knew it." By evening, Vivian had received 3 more calls from various service providers, all confirming cancellations she hadn't made. Each conversation left her more agitated, more suspicious, more off balance. The beauty of the plan was its subtlety. Nothing dramatic enough to seem like an attack, just a series of small inconveniences that could easily be explained away as coincidence or human error. But taken together, they created a pattern of chaos that would slowly erode her confidence and control. Wednesday brought news of Craig's car troubles, delivered by Danielle during her daily gossip call with Vivian. I listened from the kitchen, pretending to read the newspaper while my wife paced the living room. "It's the strangest thing," Danielle was saying, her voice carrying clearly through the phone speaker. "Craig's Tesla just died in the middle of Congress Street yesterday. Had to call a tow truck and everything. So embarrassing." "That's terrible," Vivian replied, but I caught the note of concern in her voice. Craig's reliability was part of his appeal. Successful men didn't have car trouble in public. And it gets worse. The mechanic says there's nothing wrong with it. Ran perfectly on the diagnostic tests. Craig thinks someone might have tampered with it. Tampered with it? Who would do that? He's got some theories. Apparently, he's been getting weird looks around town. People acting like they know something he doesn't. I turned the page of my newspaper, hiding my smile. Gus had done excellent work, spreading rumors through his network. Nothing actionable, just whispered suggestions that Craig Porter might not be the upstanding citizen he appeared to be. That's paranoid, Vivian said, but her voice lacked conviction. Maybe. But you know how people talk in small towns. One rumor can destroy a reputation. After Danielle hung up, Vivian sat in silence for a long time. I could practically hear the gears turning in her head, trying to connect the dots between her canceled appointments and Craig's sudden run of bad luck. Owen, she said finally. Have you heard any gossip about Craig lately? I looked up from my paper, the picture of innocent confusion. Craig Porter? Why would I hear gossip about him? No reason, just wondering. Is everything okay at work? Everything's fine, she said quickly. Just some office drama. But everything wasn't fine, and we both knew it. The foundation was starting to crack, and I hadn't even applied real pressure yet. That night, I sat in my garage workshop, surrounded by the tools and projects that had always brought me peace. Engineering was about understanding systems, identifying weak points, and applying force with precision. My marriage, my wife's entire world, really, was just another system, and every system could be brought down by someone who understood its weaknesses. I picked up my phone and scrolled through the photos I'd taken of Vivian's laptop, studying the evidence of her betrayal one more time. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. Thursday morning brought the first crack in Vivian's composure. She stood in our kitchen, staring at her phone with the kind of expression usually reserved for natural disasters or tax audits. What's wrong? I asked, buttering my toast with deliberate calm. Someone's been spreading rumors about Craig. Danielle says half the town thinks he's having an affair with a married woman. I nearly choked on my coffee. That's terrible. Any idea who's spreading these rumors? No, but they're getting specific. Someone mentioned seeing him at the Eastland Park Hotel with a woman who wasn't his wife. The Eastland Park Hotel. I'd found the receipts in Vivian's purse last week, their regular Thursday afternoon meeting spot. Gus had outdone himself, planting that particular detail with Mrs. Henley, who ran the local garden club. From there, it would spread through the town's gossip network like wildfire. Well, I said carefully, you know how people talk. Probably just jealousy. Successful guy like Craig is bound to attract rumors. Vivian's phone buzzed with a text. Her face went pale as she read it. What now? I asked. Craig wants to meet today. Says we need to talk about damage control. Sounds serious. It is serious, she snapped, then caught herself. I mean, it could affect the whole firm if these rumors get out of hand. I nodded sympathetically while mentally reviewing the day's schedule. Phase 2 would begin as soon as she left for her clandestine meeting. At 1:30 p.m., I watched Vivian's BMW disappear down our street, heading toward what she thought would be a private strategy session with her lover. What she didn't know was that their usual hotel room had been accidentally double-booked, forcing them to conduct their meeting in the very public lobby bar. Gus had arranged that particular inconvenience through his cousin, who worked hotel maintenance. Nothing illegal, just a simple scheduling error that would force Craig and Vivian into the open at exactly the wrong time. While they dealt with that crisis, I made my way to Craig's law firm for a different kind of meeting. I'm here to see Sophie Martinez, I told the receptionist. We spoke on the phone about some legal documents. Sophie was the firm's youngest paralegal, fresh out of school and eager to make connections. More importantly, she was ambitious enough to listen when someone offered her information that could advance her career. Mr. Bishop, come in, please. You said you had some documents that might be relevant to employment law? I settled into the chair across from her desk, noting the way she'd arranged her workspace to project competence beyond her years. Sophie was smart, hungry, and completely unaware that she was about to become a weapon in my war against Craig Porter. It's a delicate situation, I began, pulling out a carefully edited folder. I've discovered some concerning communications between senior staff members, personal relationships that might violate the firm's ethics policies. Sophie's eyes lit up. In a profession built on billable hours and partnership tracks, information was currency, and I was offering her a small fortune. What kind of communications? I showed her selected text messages between Craig and Vivian, nothing explicit, but enough to establish a pattern of inappropriate workplace behavior. I'd removed anything that directly implicated my wife, making it appear that Craig was pursuing an unwilling colleague. "This is concerning," Sophie said, photographing the documents with practiced efficiency. "Have you reported this to HR?" I wasn't sure if it rose to that level. But given the rumors circulating around town, I thought someone should be aware. Rumors? I leaned forward conspiratorially. People are saying Craig's having an affair with a married woman. Someone from the firm. I'd hate for that kind of scandal to damage everyone's reputation. Sophie nodded gravely, already composing her report in her head. Within hours, Craig would be called into a very uncomfortable meeting with the firm's managing partners. His afternoon tryst with Vivian was about to be interrupted by a career-threatening crisis. I left the law firm and drove to my next appointment, lunch with Tom Bradley and Jennifer Walsh, two of our oldest friends and the final pieces of Vivian's social foundation. The Harriseek at lunch and Lobster had been our regular meeting spot for years, a casual place where we'd shared countless meals and conversations. Today, it would serve as the venue for a very different kind of gathering. "Owen!" Jennifer stood to hug me as I approached their table. "It's been too long." "Where's Vivian?" "Working," I said, settling into my chair. "You know how dedicated she is to her career." Tom laughed. "Dedicated's one word for it. Jen and I were just saying we barely see you two anymore. Always some work emergency or office event. Actually, that's what I wanted to talk to you about." I'd rehearsed this conversation carefully, knowing that Tom and Jennifer's opinion carried significant weight in our social circle. They were the kind of people others looked to for guidance on social matters, respected, influential, and completely unaware of the drama unfolding in my marriage. "I'm worried about Vivian," I began. "She's been acting strange lately. Secretive. Staying out late, canceling plans, getting defensive when I ask simple questions." Jennifer's expression shifted to concern. "Strange how?" "Last week she introduced me to her work friends as her driver and bank account, in public. Laughed about it like it was a joke." Tom winced. "That's harsh, man." Even as a joke. "And yesterday, I found out someone's been canceling her appointments around town, claiming to be her and mentioning problems with her husband. She thinks I'm doing it." "Are you?" Jennifer asked directly. "Of course not. But she doesn't believe me. It's like she wants to think I'm sabotaging her." I let that sink in, watching their faces process the implications. In their minds, I was the stable one in our marriage, the reliable engineer who paid the bills and fixed the problems. If I was expressing concerns about Vivian's behavior, those concerns carried weight. "Have you tried talking to her?" Jennifer asked. "Every time I bring up my concerns, she accuses me of being paranoid or controlling. Last night she suggested I might need therapy." Tom shook his head. "That doesn't sound like the Vivian we know." "I don't think any of us know the real Vivian," I said quietly. "I'm starting to wonder if I ever did." The conversation continued for another hour, with Tom and Jennifer offering support and advice while I painted a picture of a marriage in crisis. Nothing I said was technically untrue. Vivian had called me her driver and bank account. She was being secretive, and she had suggested I needed therapy. I simply presented these facts in a context that supported my narrative. By the time we parted ways, Tom and Jennifer were thoroughly convinced that their friend Vivian Bishop was having some kind of breakdown, and that her long-suffering husband was trying desperately to hold their marriage together. The seeds were planted. Now, I just had to wait for them to grow. I arrived home to find Vivian pacing our living room like a caged animal, her phone pressed to her ear. Her face was flushed with anger and what looked like panic. "I don't care what the hotel says," she was shouting. "We had a reservation!" She ended the call and threw her phone onto the couch with enough force to crack the screen. "Bad day?" I asked mildly. "The worst. Someone screwed up our meeting room, Craig's being called in for some kind of ethics review, and now people are saying they saw us together at the hotel." "That's unfortunate. What kind of ethics review?" "Someone made a complaint about inappropriate workplace relationships. Can you believe that? As if Craig would ever behave unprofessionally." I made sympathetic noises while internally celebrating Sophie's efficiency. I'm sure it's just a misunderstanding. These things usually blow over. Not in a law firm, they don't. Reputation is everything in this business. Well, I'm sure Craig can handle it. He seems like a capable guy. Vivian studied my face, looking for something I was careful not to show. "You've been very understanding about all this work drama. Almost supportive." "You're my wife," I said simply. "Your problems are my problems." It wasn't a lie exactly. Her problems were definitely my problems. I'd just decided to become the one creating them instead of the one solving them. That night, as Vivian tossed and turned beside me, I lay awake planning the next phase. The foundation was cracking nicely, but the real demolition was yet to come. Tomorrow, I would begin dismantling the financial structure that supported her comfortable life. And unlike her affair or Craig's career troubles, this was an area where I held all the cards. After all, it's hard to maintain a lifestyle when your driver and bank account decides to take a different route. Friday morning, I woke up early and drove to First National Bank of Maine, where I'd been a customer for 15 years. My relationship manager, Patricia Donnelly, greeted me with the warm smile reserved for clients who maintained substantial balances and never caused problems. "Owen, what brings you in so early?" "I need to make some changes to my accounts," I said, settling into her office. "Nothing dramatic, just some reorganization for tax purposes." What I actually did was far more strategic. I moved my direct deposits to a new individual account, transferred our emergency fund to a separate savings account in my name only, and restructured our investments to require dual signatures for any withdrawals. All perfectly legal, all easily justified as prudent financial planning. "These changes will take effect immediately," Patricia explained as I signed the paperwork. "Your wife will need to update her automatic payments and direct deposits." "I'll let her know," I said, knowing I'd do no such thing. The beauty of financial warfare is its precision. Unlike emotional manipulation or social sabotage, money moves according to clear rules and documented procedures. There's no ambiguity, no room for interpretation. Either you have access to funds or you don't. Vivian was about to discover which category she fell into. My next stop was the insurance office, where I made equally strategic adjustments. I didn't cancel any policies, that would be too obvious, but I did change the billing arrangements and contact information. From now on, all insurance communications would come directly to me. By noon, I'd restructured our entire financial life without technically doing anything wrong. Vivian still had access to her personal checking account and credit cards, but the larger financial infrastructure that supported our lifestyle was now under my exclusive control. The first sign of trouble came at 2:17 p.m. when Vivian called from her office. "Owen, my card was declined at lunch. There must be some mistake." "That's strange." "Which card?" "The joint account debit card, the one I always use." Let me check the balance." I made a show of logging into the account, even though I knew exactly what she'd find. "Shows a zero balance. That's weird." "Zero balance? That's impossible. We had over $3,000 in there last week." "I moved some money around for tax planning. Didn't I mention that?" The silence on the other end stretched long enough for me to count to 10. "No, Owen. You didn't mention that. Sorry, I thought I told you." It's all still there, just in different accounts. I can transfer some back if you need it. I need it now. I'm supposed to meet Danielle for shopping after work. How much do you need? Another pause. 500 should be enough. For shopping? That seems like a lot for one afternoon. Since when do you question my spending? Since you started calling me your bank account, I thought. I'm not questioning it. Just making sure I transfer the right amount. I could hear her breathing heavily, fighting to control her temper. $500, Owen, please. I'll take care of it right now. But I didn't take care of it right now. Instead, I waited until 4:30 p.m., after the banks closed, to transfer exactly $200 to her account. Enough for a modest lunch, not enough for the shopping spree she'd planned. The phone rang at 5:45 p.m. $200? Vivian's voice was tight with controlled fury. I asked for 500. I thought you said 200. Must have misheard you. I specifically said 500. Are you sure? Because I distinctly remember 200. But hey, if you need more, I can transfer it Monday when the banks open. Monday? Owen, I need that money today. For what exactly? The question hung in the air like a challenge. We both knew she couldn't explain why she needed $500 for shopping without revealing details about her lifestyle that I wasn't supposed to know about. For things. Personal things. Since when do I need to justify every purchase to you? Since someone started calling me the bank account, I guess. The words came out sharper than I'd intended, cutting through her indignation like a blade. For a moment, neither of us spoke. That was a joke, Owen. You know that was a joke. Was it? Because it didn't feel like one. Look, we'll talk about this when I get home. Just transfer the money, please. I'll see what I can do. But we both knew I wouldn't do anything. For the first time in our marriage, Vivian's access to money, my money, was subject to my approval. The shift in power was subtle but unmistakable. Saturday brought a new crisis. Vivian discovered that our mortgage payment had bounced, generating a late fee and an embarrassing call from the bank. How does a mortgage payment bounce? She demanded, waving the notice in my face. We've never missed a payment in 8 years. I moved the automatic payment to a different account, I explained calmly. Must have forgotten to update the amount. Forgotten? Owen, this goes on our credit report. I'll call them Monday and explain. These things happen. These things don't just happen. You're the one who handles all the finances. How do you forget about the mortgage? I looked up from my newspaper, letting her see just a hint of the anger I'd been suppressing. Maybe because I've been distracted lately. Hard to focus on bill paying when your wife is treating you like hired help. That's not fair, isn't it? When's the last time you asked about our finances instead of just spending? When's the last time you said thank you for handling everything so you could focus on your career? Vivian stared at me, probably seeing something in my expression that hadn't been there before. The invisible, accommodating husband was showing cracks, and she didn't know how to respond. I appreciate everything you do, you know that. Do I? Because lately, it feels like I'm just the guy who pays for things. She sat down across from me, attempting the kind of serious conversation we hadn't had in months. Owen, if you're feeling unappreciated, we should talk about it. Communication is important in a marriage. Communication. The word almost made me laugh. She wanted to communicate now when her access to money was threatened. Not when she was planning her affair, not when she was humiliating me in public, but when the financial consequences of her behavior started affecting her comfort. You're right, I said. We should communicate more. Starting with honesty. What do you mean? I mean being honest about what we want from this marriage, what we expect from each other, what we're willing to give and what we need to receive. It was a perfectly reasonable request, the kind of mature conversation any marriage counselor would recommend. It was also a trap, because honest communication was the last thing Vivian could afford right now. Of course, she said quickly, We should definitely be more open with each other. Good. So let's start with Thursday afternoon. Where were you really? Her face went pale. I told you. Working late. At the Eastland Park Hotel? The silence that followed was deafening. I watched her mental calculations, trying to figure out how much I knew and how much I was guessing. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't you? Because I have credit card statements showing charges at that hotel. Regular charges, always on Thursday afternoons. Those must be work-related. Client meetings. Must be. Expensive client meetings. I stood up, folding my newspaper with deliberate care. I'm going to run some errands. We can continue this conversation later. Owen, wait. It's fine, Vivian. Like you said, communication is important. We'll have plenty of time to talk. I left her sitting at our kitchen table, staring at the mortgage notice, and probably calculating how much of our financial life she didn't actually control. The answer, as she was beginning to realize, was most of it. Outside, the October air was crisp with the promise of winter. I drove toward downtown Falmouth, my phone already buzzing with texts from my wife. But I didn't read them. Instead, I thought about structural engineering and the precise application of force. The foundation was more than cracking now, it was beginning to crumble, and I was just getting started. Sunday evening brought the confrontation I'd been orchestrating for weeks. Tom Bradley and Jennifer Walsh sat in our living room, their faces grave with the kind of concern usually reserved for interventions or funeral planning. "We're worried about both of you," Jennifer began, her voice carefully modulated in that way people use when they're trying not to trigger an explosion. "Tom and I have been talking, and we think maybe you need some perspective from people who care about you." Vivian perched on the edge of the couch like a bird ready to take flight, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. I sat in my usual chair, projecting the calm reasonableness I'd perfected over the past week. "Perspective about what?" Vivian asked, though her tone suggested she already knew. Tom cleared his throat. "Your marriage. The way you've been treating Owen, the rumors around town." "What rumors?" Jennifer and Tom exchanged glances. They'd clearly rehearsed this conversation, probably over dinner at their house, dissecting our relationship with the kind of thorough analysis usually reserved for crime scenes. "People are talking, Vivian," Jennifer said gently, "about you and Craig Porter, about late nights and hotel meetings, about the way you've been acting toward your husband." Vivian's face went through several colors before settling on a pale shade that matched our living room walls. "People need to mind their own business." "Maybe," Tom said, "but when friends are concerned, it becomes our business too." I watched the exchange with fascination, like a scientist observing a chemical reaction. This was the moment when Vivian's carefully constructed world would either adapt or collapse entirely. "Owen," Jennifer turned to me with sympathetic eyes. "You mentioned that Vivian's been distant lately. Secretive. Can you give us some specifics?" It was a perfect opening, delivered by someone Vivian trusted and respected. I took a deep breath, as if gathering courage to speak difficult truths. "It's been going on for months," I said quietly. "The late nights, the mysterious phone calls, the way she talks about me in public. Last week, she introduced me to her colleagues as her driver and bank account. Laughed about it like it was funny." "That's not what I meant," Vivian started. "Isn't it?" Tom interrupted, "because that's what it sounded like to everyone who heard it. You weren't even there." "No, but Danielle was. And she told Jennifer, and Jennifer told me. And now half the town thinks you're having some kind of breakdown." Vivian's composure finally cracked. "Breakdown? I'm not having a breakdown. I'm trying to build a career while dealing with a husband who's suddenly questioning every move I make." "Questioning?" I kept my voice level, reasonable. "Like asking where you were Thursday afternoon when the hotel charged our credit card." The room went silent. Jennifer's eyes widened. Tom leaned forward like he was watching a car accident in slow motion. "You've been checking up on me?" Vivian's voice rose to a pitch that probably scared dogs in the next county. "I've been trying to understand why our joint credit card shows regular charges at a hotel where neither of us is supposed to be. Those are work meetings. With Craig Porter? Sometimes yes. In hotel rooms? It's not what you think." Tom stood up abruptly. "Jesus, Vivian, are you having an affair?" The question hung in the air like smoke from a house fire. I watched my wife's face cycle through denial, anger, and something that might have been relief before settling on defiance. "My relationship with Craig is professional." "Professional relationships don't require hotel rooms," Jennifer said quietly. "You don't understand the pressure I'm under at work. The expectations, the competition. Sometimes we need private spaces to discuss sensitive cases." It was a reasonable explanation, the kind that might have worked 6 months ago. But Tom and Jennifer had been primed by weeks of carefully planted seeds, and they were looking at Vivian's behavior through a lens of suspicion I'd helped create. "What about the way you've been treating Owen?" Tom asked. "Calling him your bank account? Acting like he's some kind of servant?" "That was a joke, one comment taken out of context." "Was it a joke when you canceled his birthday dinner to work late?" Jennifer asked. "Was it a joke when you told Danielle that marriage was just about finding someone to pay your bills?" Vivian stared at Jennifer. "I never said that." "Danielle says you did, last month at the wine bar. You said Owen was useful but boring, and that you were thinking about upgrading." I had to admire Jennifer's delivery. The quote was probably accurate. Danielle had a talent for remembering the worst things people said, but the timing was perfect. Vivian couldn't deny it without calling her best friend a liar. Even if I said something like that, it was just venting. Everyone complains about their spouse sometimes. "Not like that," Tom said firmly. "Not in public and not with that kind of contempt." "Contempt?" Vivian's voice cracked. "I don't have contempt for Owen." "Then why are you having an affair with Craig Porter?" The question came from me, delivered in the same tone I might use to ask about the weather. 3 weeks of planning had led to this moment, and I wanted to savor it. "I'm not—" "Yes, you are." I pulled out my phone and scrolled to the screenshots I'd prepared. Text messages, hotel receipts, restaurant charges, even photos from Craig's social media showing you at places you told me you weren't. I handed the phone to Jennifer, who studied the screen with the kind of horrified fascination people reserve for traffic accidents. Tom looked over her shoulder, his expression growing darker with each swipe. "Oh, Vivian," Jennifer whispered, "how could you?" "It's not what it looks like." "It looks like you're cheating on your husband with your boss," Tom said bluntly. "What else could it look like?" Vivian turned to me with desperate eyes. "Owen, please. Let me explain." "Explain what?" "The affair? The lies? The way you've been planning to divorce me and take everything I've worked for?" Her face went white. "How do you know about that?" "Because you're not as smart as you think you are, Vivian. And I'm not as stupid as you hoped." I stood up, walking to the window that overlooked our perfectly manicured lawn. The yard I maintained, the house I paid for, the life I'd built for a woman who saw me as nothing more than a convenient resource. "Here's what's going to happen," I said, turning back to face the room. "Tom and Jennifer are going to leave, because this is between you and me now. Then you're going to pack a bag and find somewhere else to stay while we figure out how to end this marriage. Owen, you can't just throw me out." "I'm not throwing you out. I'm giving you the freedom you obviously want. You can stay with Craig, or Danielle, or your mother, but you're not staying here. This is my house, too." "Actually, it's not. The deed is in my name, the mortgage comes from my account, and the insurance is paid with my money. You live here because I allow it." The legal reality hit her like a physical blow. In her rush to plan our divorce, she'd overlooked the basic fact that I owned everything she considered hers. Tom and Jennifer gathered their coats in uncomfortable silence, probably regretting their decision to intervene in our marriage. As they reached the door, Jennifer turned back. "Owen, if you need anything, I'll be fine," I said. "I'm good at solving problems." After they left, Vivian and I stood in our living room like strangers, the weight of 8 years of marriage collapsing around us. "I never meant for it to happen," she said quietly. "Yes, you did. You planned it, executed it, and enjoyed it. The only thing you didn't plan for was getting caught. What do you want from me?" "Nothing. That's the point, Vivian. I don't want anything from you anymore." She stared at me for a long moment, probably seeing me clearly for the first time in years. The invisible husband had become visible, and she didn't like what she saw. "I'll pack a bag," she said finally. "Good choice." As she climbed the stairs to our bedroom, I sat back down in my chair and considered the evening's work. The confrontation had gone exactly as planned, with Tom and Jennifer serving as perfect witnesses to Vivian's downfall. But this was just the beginning. Tomorrow, the real demolition would start.